My name is Dr. Laura Emily Clark, and myself and Elizabeth Alotta today will be speaking on behalf of the group UCNUS. However, I will note that other members are also present and available for questions during question time. And we'll be reflecting today on our experiences as being part of a multidisciplinary collaborative research group. So UCNUS stands for the University Collaborative Network of Interdisciplinary Studies, and the list of members is on this first slide. So UCNUS is a collaborative research group. We have 9 members currently. When we began, we were all HDR students enrolled at the University of Queensland, and we have a diverse set of backgrounds, including Australia, South Korea, Vietnam, China, Brazil, and Bangladesh. So in 2017, a group of HDR students invited other enrolled HDR students within the humanities and social sciences and communication schools to join a research group, with the goal of exploring our own HDR experiences and journey from the position of researcher as participant. The first meeting was held in October 2017, and the current members joined over the next 12-month period, with a large number coming and going. Although we were all initially students, nearly 3 years later, a number of us have graduated and become doctors. Some of us have moved overseas as well. So we joined to meet and learn from peers, to explore other research areas and contexts, and to learn new methodologies and skills by being part of a large research group. However, what we've found in our analysis of personal reflections that we've been recently working on is that it's not necessarily actually these initial practical goals that have sustained this group, but rather that it's the rich interpersonal connections between us that have actually anchored us together. So as I said, the goal of this project is to explore the HDR journey. And the reason for this was that we found that the existing literature provided limited insights into the experiences of students doing a HDR. The focus has remained on segmented portions of the journey and structural issues. For example, relationships between students and supervisors, student motivation, and the integration of students into the university environment. But none really gave an intimate and holistic understanding of HDR students' journeys, which is a gap that we're looking to fill, as well as having the chance to take part of an ongoing collaborative project. So our paper today is largely concerned with reflecting on this experience in itself, rather than the research necessarily. So we'll speak a little bit about the practicalities of running such a large group, and then the key themes of this journey as emerged in our personal reflections. Some key themes that came up in this analysis included the dynamics and interactions involved in being part of a large group like this, the evolving nature of the group and our approach to collaboration, the nature of relationships between members, including supporting others, developing friendships, and resolving conflicts. This paper will be giving quite a rosy view of this group, but it's worth noting that we all mentioned conflicts and challenges of working together in our reflections. And finally, changing memberships and member movements. So in the beginning, as novices, we did not know what to expect or what we would encounter and experience when being part of a large research group. And often what we found is that it evolved significantly. Changes encountered included with members coming and going, and the practicalities associated with such movement and shifting ideas as a result. We also, the relationships and interactions, which can be expected in such a large group, led to different ideas, different thoughts and perspectives and ways of doing, where methodologically, theoretically, and disciplinarily diverse as a group. And we also saw a shift from our initial output-oriented goals to a current focus, which is on exploring the journey of being an active member of the research group such as this. So to quote Thomas Klein, collaboration is an increasingly prominent mode of research. And indeed, I'm sure we've all seen the calls for transdisciplinary research echoing across the university space. Yet each collaboration looks different, develops its own norms, and the outcomes vary wildly. So in terms of having such a large group, we had to include a range of practical management methods. particularly meeting times and meeting rules. So in the beginning, we regularly met monthly, usually for an hour or two at lunchtime. However, we've seen increasing flexibility in arranging meeting times, particularly this year, including the realities of the isolation of different members who are in different locations and face shifting commitments. So in 2020, we moved from a face-to-face and occasional Zoom meetings format to solely Zoom meetings. And we now meet late evenings or weekends as suits the majority. We also moved from solely using email to communicate to a WhatsApp chat group, which is easier and a more immediate way of keeping contact. Early on, it also became apparent that the group needed rules or guidelines for appropriate and accepted behavior and ways of interacting during group meetings and managing decision-making. Some issues emerged as the minutes did not fully reflect opinions voiced and debated in meetings, and therefore absent members' involvement was impacted, particularly regarding continuity with the project and ability to complete set work by the due date. So we've come to somewhat be more relaxed about this as our practices have solidified and as group norms have come into effect. And I'll now hand back to Elizabeth.
Thanks, Laura. I'm going to start by talking about the data collection, storage and analysis processes. Different data collection approaches have been used at different stages of the project as it became apparent that we were undertaking two distinct projects, both of which would yield useful research outcomes. There was the HDR Journey project and the Collaborative Research project. Initially, we used minute agendas and meeting minutes to record the group's discussions, decisions and plans. We soon realised that journaling was going to be a more important step towards recording our experiences, as the project would be more than just the experience of being an HDR student, and would also involve the experiences of being a member of such a large collaborative research group. A Dropbox folder was established for the group, and in the months that followed, members added their contributions to a journal. A visual record of each member's journey was recorded at the start of the data collection process. We asked each person to draw a timeline of their journey and to show the highs and the lows and include some annotations. We then interviewed each other to share our individual stories. The interviews were recorded, transcribed and confirmed by each member, who chose their own pseudonym for the purpose of de-identifying their personal data. We have since each written a short reflective piece which promoted and prompted a lot of consideration of the nature of the group, our individual roles, and our feelings about the collaborative experience. All the data that we've collected has been stored on the UQ RDMS as specified in our ethics approval. As we have progressed to presentation and writing phase of the project, we are working collaboratively using Google and Zoho documents. To date, no identifiable personal matters have been disclosed outside the RDMS. And in collecting and analysing the data, we have used a narrative inquiry approach involving thematic analysis and a self-reflective collaborative reflection phase. So, dynamics involved in being part of a large collaborative group have been very complex at times and have evolved over time. So we've seen the nature of the group and our approach to working collaboratively evolve consistently throughout the project so far. Likewise, the nature of our relationships between members has changed significantly. It is also very different from many of our initial expectations when joining the group, what we thought the group would involve, what the project would involve, what we have experienced, what we would still desire. Mid to late 2018, we experienced a significant and critical moment in the group's progress. And collaborative journal entries ceased, and each member individually faced the decision of whether we were going to stay or leave. Regrouping took several months, during which very little progress was made. This was a healing period for us, and we slowly refocused on our goals and objectives, which resulted in a big shift for us in terms of the group's dynamics and member involvement. So we shifted away from an output-oriented goal focus, although the output is still strongly desired by members. towards recognising and valuing the uniqueness of the group within our own personal and professional lives. We also acknowledge and increase awareness of the importance of networks formed within the group between individual members and the vital importance of trust. So the importance of tolerance, acceptance, compassion and empathy for each other has been a key aspect to the success of the group. As we each travel the HDR journey path, we've encountered our own critical moments away from the group. Within our professional and personal lives, we've supported each other, and the majority of members have taken time away from the project, with the shared understanding that we can return to the group when we are able. A core value that the group has shown is do what you can when you can. And if you can't, then tell the group and someone else will pick up the slack for you. There is a focus on judgment-free communication, which appears to be a key element in not only sustaining a large group like this one over an extended period of time, but also in overcoming differing expectations and opinions. The group is also highly diverse, as Laura indicated in the beginning. We come from a range of cultural and linguistic backgrounds, life experiences and disciplinary approaches. Therefore, flexibility and patience, as well as a commitment and good intent, has been fundamental to developing the levels of trust necessary to overcome our differences. So why are we still here? The group has been going for a long time with limited tangible outputs, and yet we continue to participate. And within the reflections, our recent reflections, we see a great deal of positivity and tenderness towards each other. It's about friendships and trust. The importance of friendships that have developed and the admiration we have for each other and mutual respect and the shared trust which contributes to being able to work together, but also to develop a supportive and safe group in which to unburden ourselves. Acknowledgement of each other's personal background and situation is also important. We appreciate the challenges of being a student far away from family and support systems, of living and studying in a different country with its unique culture and language. Explaining Australian language was quite interesting at times, as well as the differences and difficulties encountered when communicating with each other. Language can be a barrier at times. We are all HDR students when we began, so we have a shared understanding of what a difficult time we are each having as we journey, but also the variations in the struggle, both across time and in individual experiences. Empathy and appreciation is also another key aspect. We've also gained a shared love and appreciation for each person's journey throughout their HDR studies, as well as their own life journey. So, in conclusion, here are 2 quotes from group members about their experiences of having been a member of UGNIS. Unevenness in participation doesn't mean hierarchy and difference, but a way to be compassionate and respectful. Another member, I also appreciate the conflicts and challenges as I have learnt a lot from addressing them, and the team grows stronger after dealing with issues together. Collaborative projects and the groups that run them are each a unique experience. For this group, practical management techniques have been vital to maintain a functional group. However, it is the interpersonal relationships and communication practices that have made the group into what it is today. As we move into our next phase, with tangible research output being a core goal, we're also taking the time to reflect on how we have each grown as a group and within the group, as many of us continue or have completed our HDR journeys. And yet, we all remain committed to this collaborative experience known as UGNIS. The following slide just provides some references for further reading if you're interested, and we'd like to thank you all for listening.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Laura and Elizabeth, for your presentation on what I'm sure is a skill that many of us hopefully will get to engage with as our experience as HDRs, but post PhD as well with collaborative research. So thank you so much, and also thank you for sticking to time. Makes my job a lot easier. We will have questions at the end, so if anyone does have questions for them, maybe write them down so that you don't forget them. I would now like to invite Devasha Saka to present on challenges in conducting qualitative research with people with disabilities in low and middle income countries.
Thank you so much. Can you see my slides, please?
Do you, oh yes, you can share your slides.
Yeah, can you see
So
that?
do you know
please?
how to share your, do you know how to share your screen, or did you,
Yes,
sorry, did you
yes.
put something in the chat? You need to share your screen. I don't have your slides.
You see that now?
Yes.
Thank you.
There we go.
Yep. Yeah. So around 15% of the world population have some form of disability, and people with disabilities are most vulnerable people across the globe. Most of the people with disabilities are living in the low and middle income countries, and they experience extreme poverty. People with disabilities have less access to basic services, including education, health, transportation, and legal services. They are mostly out of social network and live in isolated life, especially in the rural areas. Moreover, in many cases, people with disabilities are perceived as not real people. Despite some of the above mentioned findings from the existing literatures, reports, or empirical studies, very few research studies have been conducted so far with people with disabilities, especially in low and middle income countries. The United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Persons with Disabilities provided importance to the availability of disability data and research. Following these global guidelines on the importance of conducting research, more research is needed to explore the lived experiences of people with disabilities so that policymakers can make informed decisions. To capture the lived experiences of people with disabilities, one of the best possible solutions is to reach them and listen to their stories. Thus, in many cases, qualitative research can contribute to explore many unheard details of the people with disabilities. Therefore, the aim of this paper is to fill the gap in the existing literature and knowledge of conducting research with people with disabilities in the setting of a country like Bangladesh. The fieldwork for this present research was in Bangladesh. Bangladesh is one of the developing countries in South Asia with more than 165 million population. Bangladesh has progressed well economically over the years after independence. However, the socio-economic condition of people with disabilities did not change at all. The statistics of people with disability is controversial in Bangladesh because different studies identified different numbers of people with disabilities. Due to the fluctuation of the numbers of people with disabilities, policymakers might not focus on the issue of the empowerment of people with disabilities. To protect the basic rights of people with disabilities, the Bangladesh government has passed Disability Act in 2013. Due to lack of proper implementation of the act, people with disabilities become further excluded in society. Within this context, to empower poor people, recently some non-governmental organizations, microfinance institutions started offering microfinance to some people with disabilities. Microfinance has been playing a crucial role to alleviate poverty and the empowerment of poor people over more than 3 decades in Bangladesh. Microfinance is defined as the extension of small loans to the very poor in combination with other financial services such as savings accounts, training, health services, networking, and peer support. Despite some criticisms about the impact of microfinance, it becomes apparent that microfinance opened the door for people with disability or poor people to access to credit so that beneficiaries can use that credit, especially for self-employment. My present research is further exploring how microfinance is contributing to the social and economic empowerment of people with disabilities in Bangladesh. Based on the background, this paper represents my experiences of conducting research with people with disabilities. In this research, I interviewed 25 people with disabilities who accessed microfinance, 10 people with disabilities who tried but failed to access microfinance. Interviewees included different types of disabilities such as physical disability, blind, low vision, mental illness, speech disorder, hearing impairment, multiple disabilities. Interviews are conducted both in rural and urban areas, including male and female persons with disabilities. I'll be talking about some of my experiences of contact research with people with disabilities. First, I'll be talking about locating challenges of locating people with disabilities. Unlike other social research where target people are easily located and can be reached, the unique social environment within which people with disabilities live and function in Bangladesh society, render it difficult to look at, identify, and interview them. In order to select interviewees in the urban area, I forged a partnership with one of the disabled people organizations, namely Action on Disability and Development, ADD International. After meeting with officials of ADD in their head office in Dhaka, the capital city, I was provided with contact information of 3 people with disabilities who lived in one of the slums of Dhaka. Utilizing a snowball sampling technique, these initial interviews eventually led me to additional interviewees living in other slums. However, even in urban areas where people with disabilities that are in poverty tend to live in confined areas such as slums, finding those that matched my research criteria was not easy and proved quite time consuming. It took 2 months. In order to interview people with disabilities that receive microfinance in rural areas, I developed a partnership with Tengamara Mohila Shobuz Shongo, TMSS, a microfinance institution that provides microcredit to people with disabilities in the rural areas in the northern part of Bangladesh. In rural areas, in some cases, instead of giving microfinance directly to people with disabilities, the NGO TMSS offered credit to their family members instead. This posed a problem in identifying the real beneficiaries, as some of the people with disabilities did not even know that their families had borrowed money from the microfinance institutions on their behalf or in their name. Another major challenge during this research was locating and identifying people with disabilities in the rural area who were refused to access microfinance. People with disabilities in rural areas had almost no contact with each other, especially those who refused microfinance. Concerned microfinance institutions also had no idea how to find people who have been refused credit, and this is because no records of these cases are kept. Notwithstanding these challenges, I was able to meet my quota of locating and interviewing people with disabilities that applied but were refused access to microfinance. This was possible because I had to discuss multiple times with microfinance staff and communicated with microfinance clients that require substantial efforts. A general impression that I gathered during the research is that people in the study area did not know much about or did not show much concern nor empathy about people with disabilities, and thus were vastly ignorant of their whereabouts and conditions. For example, a local city council chief who has been elected for more than 15 years confided that he did not know much about the high prevalence of people with disabilities in his area until an NGO revealed the data. The NGO itself did not have much information on the people with disabilities until they specifically surveyed the population for a donor agency funded project. Most people with disabilities remain undetected and unrecorded, hidden within their respective families. This also has to do with the negative cultural perception of people with disabilities in the society, where even the family members feel uncomfortable discussing their presence in the family. In summary, given the scanned information on people with disabilities, locating the target population for research proved a very daunting and time-consuming task. So too was the task of interviewing. Now I'll be talking about some experiences of interviewing people with disabilities. As people with disabilities are marginalized and socially excluded in Bangladesh, they are often less forthcoming in engaging with people outside the family. Therefore, as a researcher, I took extra care and showed sensitivity while interviewing them. I took the time to develop trust and build rapport before I commenced interviews. I also had to suspend and restart interviews multiple times to meet people's needs. Most of the people with disabilities have had no experience of participating in interviews on a one-to-one basis. As a result, and at times, they are also joined by family members, and in such cases, I employed triangulation tools such as comparing data with that of other participants, community leaders, and microfinance institution staff, and a research assistant to verify the reliability of reported data. Interviewing people with disabilities in urban and rural areas revealed two very different scenarios in terms of the level of confidence and environment of an interview. In the city area, while locating people with disabilities was relatively easy, one challenge I faced was to interview them individually. I also noticed that at the time of interviews, they tended to come as a group to participate in the interview. Practically, it was not possible to separate them, as firstly, it was a very small space, and secondly, they felt more comfortable staying together during the interview. One positive aspect of this group interview was that while participants of the group interview are sharing their stories, they were also cross-checking their responses with each other. In rural areas, making contact with interviewees prior to the interview proved a difficult task. Many people who were poor did not own or have access to mobile phones. On several occasions, after I had made appointments through an MFI microfinance institutions and traveled to meet them, no one would be there to meet with me. One of the possible reasons was that participants sometimes forgot the interview date and time due to their health issues. As a result, I had to be very flexible as time, location, and site of the interview changed most of the time. The location of interviews would also vary, ranging from within people's homes to the side of the street under the shade of a tree. Furthermore, in order to suit the convenience of interviewees, in some cases, interviews are conducted in the evening, at night, at their homes, sometimes without electricity, under the open sky, in the moonlight. Another unique feature of rural interviews was that in some cases, and these were more exceptions than the norm, the family members would come and stay for a while with the interviewee, mainly to boost confidence and encouragement to the interviewee. Keeping interviews focused on the research agenda also proved a difficult task. Sometimes interviewees would suddenly stop talking or start discussing completely different issues as a way to reduce stress. Interview of people with speech disorders posed different challenges, and in such case, family members would inevitably join to the interview to help. However, it was difficult for me to identify a professional interpreter due to resource limitation and budget constraints. Conducting interviews with people with multiple disabilities posed another kind of challenge, as in these interviews, family members had to join to assist the principal interviewee. Although these moments were an exception rather than the norm, their presence was both a helpful and complicating factor. For example, in one particular case, one person with multiple disabilities stopped talking after 15 minutes of the interview, mainly out of nervousness, and asked his mother to help him continue. After 10 minutes, the mother invited her daughter-in-law to join and assist the interview to continue, and also to encourage the participant to share his experience with as many facts as possible. During the same interview, when the daughter-in-law started a conversation, one of the sisters of the participant who had mental illness came in and interrupted her. These vintage demonstrate the complexities of interviewing people with disabilities in Bangladesh unique social contexts that are characterized more by kinship than by individuality. When I was interviewing a person with hearing impairment, it became difficult for me to communicate with her effectively, as she had no digital device or assistive technology that could help her to listen to my conversation. Therefore, I had to raise my voice at the beginning, but immediately I realized that it might create confusion to the interviewee about my attitude of speaking loudly, and also loud conversation might impact others, including my research data privacy protocol. In that particular case, I invited the daughter of the participant who helped me to communicate with the interviewee effectively. Since family members are well known about the usual way of communication, the strategy to engage family members in the interview process supported me to obtain quality data. An additional challenge was the impact of the interviews on me as a researcher. Interviewing people with disabilities was stressful and affected my emotional state somewhat. These interviews caused trauma at times. I had to cry many times after listening to these stories associated with exclusion, helplessness, poverty, vulnerability of people with disabilities. I could not control these emotions, but I was proactive in self-care and followed a number of strategies, including breaks after interviews, traveling to some beautiful places nearby, and spending quality time with my family. Notwithstanding some of the challenges with research and interviewing people with disabilities in Bangladesh that I have highlighted above, I feel very fortunate that I have been blessed with this great opportunity to engage in research for these most marginalized and excluded people in Bangladesh. More research is key to understand the different phenomena of conducting research with people with disabilities, and some context-based solutions might require addressing specific issues. Based on my experiences, some of the key recommendations I can propose that could benefit researchers, policymakers, scholars, and relevant stakeholders to consider while conducting research with people with disabilities, especially in the context like Bangladesh. Dissemination of challenges of conducting research in the different seminars and conferences is really important, so that relevant stakeholders could understand those challenges and design necessary strategies to address those challenges. The researcher needs to provide substantial time to prepare to conduct research with people with disabilities. This will allow researchers to be focused and flexible when needed. Empathy to people with disabilities and their family members is crucial for conducting research with people with disabilities. Researchers also need to build rapport with the people with disabilities and in some cases with the family members of people with disabilities. The researcher needs to ensure the safety and health issues of research participants and for themselves while conducting research. In this case, they can coordinate with local hospitals, doctors, or nurses if necessary. The privacy of individual interview needs to maintain without any compromise. Otherwise, researcher might put people with disabilities in a risk in society. People with disabilities are vulnerable and poor. Therefore, the researcher should value the time and efforts of people with disabilities. Considering these issues, the researcher should provide some gifts or other convenient support to interviewees. Researchers need to make sure that they proactively communicate as many times as needed with people with disabilities. Sometimes when researchers conduct field research, especially in the rural area, to interview people with disability, researchers might not find them as their places. However, people with disabilities are kind and proactive that they could come to visit the researcher living place once they heard that someone looked for them. This is mainly due to the reason that since they are already out of social network and excluded, they do not want to be disconnected from someone who ever contacted them. In my case, I was living in one of the government's dormitory at the sub-district level while collecting data. The dormitory was generally kept for government's officials for overnight stay when they visit field offices in the remote area. However, while I was in the field, two people with disabilities came to visit me, but since I was in the government's protected residential area, they did not get the confidence to knock me. Therefore, it is very important that the researcher should break any communication barriers. After finishing the interview, researchers should say goodbye with love and care with future probable meetup and possible ways to access articles in the future. So these are my experience that I had while working with people with disabilities for my research project. And I think I'm really blessed to have this research with them because this is important to disseminate all the information or experiences that I had working with them so that more research could be conducted to understand better the lived experience of people with disabilities. Thank you so much for listening.
So much for that presentation, Devashis. It was very interesting, and I think what I can see linking your work with the previous presentation is the idea of relationality and relationships and how important that is to research, even in completely different contexts and projects. So thank you so much. There's been a lot of chat going on in the chat box, so I think you'll have a few questions once we get to the discussion at the end of this today. I would like to invite our next presenter, who is Faisal Al-Shamari, and he is going to be talking to us and focusing a little bit more on data. And he's talking about what can qualitative data reveal about adopting cloud apps in higher education, something that's probably twice as important given the current context. So Faisal, when you're ready, take it away.
Okay, hi everyone. My voice is good now? Okay, thank you for this opportunity, Daniel, and thank you for everyone who attended this presentation. Today, I need to show you what I have discovered in qualitative data. My thesis or my topic today is related to adoption cloud computing in higher education in context of Saudi Arabia. As all of us now, we use a cloud at the moment, but you know, a cloud is survive us in this conference and in this pandemic. So I need to show you what academia have said about their perception. By the way, my study is focused about perception from statistic perspective. So in this slide or presentation, I will show you what a qualitative data has showed me. Just before I start, I have just published my book, my translated book from English to Arabic language. I just received my copy 3 days ago. So it's talk about artificial intelligence and the future of education. And just I need to share this good news in the beginning of this presentation. So my point will talk now cloud computing apps. So what does that mean? My background in this research, or we speak about my problem. My framework, theoretical framework or conceptual framework in this study, we speak about methodology and quantitative, just a little bit of quantitative, and we start with qualitative. So as you see in this picture, how the growth of cloud computing around the world in the beginning of this year from 2012 until 2 years ago. It's difficult to define the cloud, but in this particular study, I will say the practice of using network to manage, store data, teaching by clouding. My study will focus about the tools of Google and Microsoft as is in Saudi Arabia. This is the example of implementation cloud computing in education, as you can see here in the GIF picture. See how the owner, which the student, he writes some document and the teacher give him some feedback. Someone, he speak with a voice, and the voice has written in the next photo here. So this is just an example to show you how can cloud survive our education, especially in this data collection. So just to give you a preview, I have a good opportunity in Saudi Arabia when I'm dealing with faculty member, with academia more than a student. So I am a lecturer in university, but I'm dealing with faculty member more than a student. So when I read the literature, they said there is no study has emphasized the importance of investigation faculty member voice about adoption technology in cloud computing. So the aim of this study to identify and measure the factor that influence user, which is academia, to use cloud in Saudi Arabia. So there is a lot of question. I have a question. There is a lot of question to investigate or tackle or address this problem. So just I focus on two questions here is what's the factor that influence faculty member behavior intention to use cloud application in education in Saudi Arabia. I solved this from a statistic by next slide, I will explain that. And then next question is why. This is my presentation. We speak about why did significant factor reach to significant level and what the voice of faculty member. So this is the framework what I have adopted. This is the newest model or framework is called Unified Theory for Adoption and Use Technology by Finkatish, who produced this publication in 2012. So I manipulate with this framework to create a new framework that related to the context of Saudi Arabia, like the idea of security, the speed of internet bandwidth, and so on, like awareness. So we measure all of them by statistic, but now I need to show you what the qualitative say. This is just a small picture of methodology. So I start with the quantitative, with online survey. We send this survey randomly across of Saudi Arabia. I am lucky all of universities in Saudi Arabia has involved in this survey. So discover all their perception. And after that, we analyze the data by something called explanatory factor analysis and structural equation modeling. But I have presented this in the previous conference, but this conference I will focus about qualitative. After that, I prepare the questionnaire to interview. So we prefer to use structure interview because we focus about a specific factor and we use thematic analysis. I am now producing the finding. This is just overview of a statistic. I have collected 888 faculty member So it was good and good number. However, just for 460 was valid. In short, just quantitative show me the performance expectancy and effort expectancy and hedonic motivation and security was significant. They affect their attention to use this technology. There is no difference between gender, experience, type of university, which is old university or new university, but we have to speak this in quantitative result. This is the map of, can show you my participant in the quantitative. This is the map of Saudi Arabia. And if you see here, the black, this mean man, and the pink is an academia from another university. So we try to investigate with them this issue. We ask him about all of these factors. Why is that affect to you, attention to use, why and why not? And this is the first one. It was with me, significant is usefulness, or what you call it here is performance expectancy. So in interview, we call it usefulness because people, they know, because I have done this interview with Arabic language. So when I translate this, they said is not, we didn't understand. We use usefulness to explain to them what this definition, what I investigate here in the qualitative data is this dimensions. Why people say that? Because the thematic analysis show me by Leximansa here, when I put all of the text of interview, they show me this map, if you can see here. The people focus about the student, keeping communication, focus about the student, and provide some technology, goals, apps by using mobility. I generate this data by qualitative data. As you can see here, it's an example. Participant 8 said, yes, indeed, because provide significant benefit during my teaching. As well, participant 3, they said, help my student to exchange experience. Or some participants say is just saving my time, solving the problem. As you can see here, the dimension here, they tell me why this reached to significant level. Another factor, let me see, move to another significant factor was security. Security is fundamental topic in the cloud computing. Remember when you start to use a cloud, who people, they didn't use it. They was afraid from use cloud. What about security? What about recording the data? Who listen to that? So this is what's significant as well. But however here, when I see the dimension here, the faculty member is also afraid about the student confidentiality. So as well losing and theft, losing their data. So this means, as you can see here by Leximansa, when I generate all of these topics, is help me to investigate the dimension that related to security. The last thing what I need to mention is the last factor, which is hedonic motivation, which call it fun, or the idea of fun or enjoyable. So people say this is a significant because as you can in the cloud, when you use a cloud document, it's like kind of fun when you use it to the student. So the dimension was enhancing teaching performance, engaging student, and improving learning process. As you can see here, what's the fun, the idea of fun generate the data, and also, sorry, what participants say here about fun. The last slide here, they just give you overview of all of these domain or factors. I mentioned here out of 4. So just here what you use in interview as a concept, usefulness, fun, and this is the definition in my presentation. And here the dimension, what make statistics, give me understand of statistic work. So this was my end of my presentation. I need to also thank the people who is not here, who was a part of my PhD, Dr. Tony Wright and Dr. Fizenti, who has helped me to this one. I need to thank them, as well as Dr. Kate McLeay. He worked with me with the qualitative data. And thank you for that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that fascinating presentation, Faisal. And yes, I can't wait for the question time, and hopefully I get to ask one as well, because I think all of the issues that you had with the language and everything sound particularly interesting, and the Saudi Arabian context. So what I'd like to do now is, we've still got about 15 minutes or 13 minutes, is invite questions for any or all of our presenters. So if anyone has a question, feel free to pop on your mic and ask your question. I think we did have one that we can probably ask, that was in the chat while we're waiting. Maybe people are thinking of a question. And I think it would probably be mostly relevant for you, Debashis, and that was around this idea of empathy and what that means, and whether it's always a good thing in research. So I think we kind of were discussing maybe sympathy or empathy. Are they problematic? What do you think? You mentioned you felt a lot of empathy when you were doing your interviews. Can you speak a little bit more about that? Oh, you're on mute.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, that's an interesting question, actually. Yeah, so so this is my first experience that I had a research with people with disabilities, and that was fascinating. So I was also learning a lot from these experiences, and that changed my the mindset, and also the way I viewed people with disability earlier before doing this research. That's the first experience that I had, and I was also learning when I was doing this research. And one of the things that I understood is like they need actually empathy. I'm not ignoring the importance of sympathy, but yeah, they need actually empathy, because the problem they face, we should realize their problem their own way, you know. So they need some sort of accommodation. I mean, because for people with for instance, intellectual disabilities or multiple disabilities, they have different issues. People with mental illness, they have their own issues. People with, for instance, hearing impairment, so they have their own issues, you know. So I had to adjust with few things their own way, so that they feel comfortable, and also, you know, they share the experiences, because they really wanted to talk to about their issues, their experiences, because nobody you know, visits them. And one of my female participants was saying that you're the first person that came to me, you know, and just asked me about my experience. Nobody came to me before. So that was like, you know, it's so kind of emotional kind of thing, you know. So yeah, and yeah, and for instance, like that I was discussing in my presentation, that I had some challenges when I was conducting interview with a person with multiple disabilities, that his family members also joined in, and then you know, and then his mother, and then his wife and sister. So in that cases, if you lose your patience, then you just hurt them, because it's not kind of their fault. It's the reality, is the diversity, you know, you have to accept. So in that time, what you need is to like be empathetic, you know, because his sister also had like intellectual disability or mental illness, and then she was talking like that. I mean, I can just stop her, don't talk, not like this, you know. So I had to adjust with that, you know, had different strategies, like to be patient, and then also like spend more time with them, talk with another family members. This is how I manage the environment, and also able to talk with them, because I didn't want to exclude them, not listening and coming up from the discussion. I wanted to listen to their stories, but I just had to adjust with that. And this is what I mean for empathy. I mean, really they want empathy, not actually, because this is the diversity of the life, and they accept it, and they're really proactive, and more active for doing their livelihood. They just need kind of support from people, the environment, you know, favorable environment, so that they can be able to do what they want to do. So this is what I meant like empathy. And I think this word is really important when you interact with them, especially for intensive interaction, like for 1 hour or 30 minutes, you know. So when you don't know them and go to different new places and do research. And I think, yeah, this is, I mean, one of the best experiences that I have in my life to work with them. I'm really happy to discuss about this. Thanks so much.
Wonderful. And we do have one more question for you as well that's just come through. That is from Ian, who's asked, does the presence of disability cause problems with using a standard approach in research?
Sorry, can you just make it clear? So what?
So Ian has asked, it's in the chat if you'd like to read it as well. Does the presence of disability cause problems with using a standard approach in research?
Not, as I said before, I mean, because you can, I mean, there might be some standard, way of doing research, but for these vulnerable people, I mean, the important thing is to like reasonable accommodation or adjustment. So I think this should be the key criteria for doing research. I mean, you can go with your own plan with, some rigid ideas, blah, blah, but practically what happens, like I had that mindset as well, I'll go and then I thought it's probably my place. I've been working there for 10 years in different organizations, working with them, but I had no idea how to deal with them, and then I learned a lot. This is how I see, like, you need to adjust with this environment and the context, all the times that you go there. And for instance, for my case, what happened, like I just did not go to them and ask for interviews. I went there, built a rapport, spent with the family members before taking interview. I went there one day before, and then even sometimes talked over phone. This is how you have to manage them, otherwise, because they have more complexity sometimes, like they really don't want to come out and want to spend time. They don't sometimes trust, or even, because they're not comfortable, they don't have experience to share the experiences. So all these critical things you need to analyze before conducting interviews, specifically one by one basis. And even you have to consider their family members' attitudes and experiences and the way they treat people with disabilities. In one case, like what happened, I was dealing with, because my research was on social and economic empowerment, so access to finance and how did they change their lives. So I had a question, like, because she was doing something with the credit, but she had some income. Then my question was like, can you use that income for your own? Because his family member was close by, and because this kind of question is very sensitive, and if she would say like no or yes, and if it affects her future or his future, the livelihood in his or her family, so that's very sensitive issue. So you need to consider which way you need to ask what questions, and I was this, and the family members are defending sometimes, and that was my experience. No, I should not, like, I should be very sensitive what kind of questions I will have. So these are the things that are very, very serious issues, because they're already excluded, vulnerable, and even in their families. So you have to be very, very careful what you're asking, what you're talking. So it basically depends on, like, it's more affordable or context specific. Research method should be, like, I mean, more effective. But it depends.
Yeah, I think it sounds like maybe the standard research approach is the thing causing the problem rather than the people. So if you have a good researcher that's doing things, then doing things the right way, then it wouldn't be such an issue. We've just got another comment, and Damien, I'm assuming that's also for Devashis. Do you think there needs to be a balancing financial enablement with social enablement?
Yes, both are important. I mean, because I was working in microfinance industry for a few years, and then we thought like only access to finance probably can import them. But of course, that's also important component of empowerment, but also social inclusion is another. Both are linked together. You can have like one single solution for import them. So if you want to include them socially, you need to have access to financial kind of inclusion, or if you want to even give them opportunity to get into access to financial inclusion, you need to be for socially included, because you need reference, and you need to have, like, good position in the society, even in the families, to be confident enough to access to financial resources. So both are actually very critical. I mean, if you want to see their empowerment strategies or inclusion, you need to work for both, even other dimensions like kind of exclusions as well. It's not only inclusion, probably exclusion. So social inclusion, financial inclusion, empowerment, even intersectionality is also important. And these are the, multidimensional approach we need to address if we want to basically import them, or, to include them in society.
Thank you so much. I'm just conscious of time. We only have about 4 minutes left. Does anyone have any questions they would like to ask Laura and Elizabeth or Faisal?
I have a question for Faisal. Hello. I think it's really interesting the quantity of apps that we have to help the learning process, especially now that we are all jumped into the online education. And what happened in Chile, and this is related to my question, is that there's so many apps that in some schools we have seen that different teachers, they choose different means to communicate multiple apps, and what happened in the kids and also the teachers, they end overwhelmed by the quantity. So my question is, if there's any study you have seen about how to manage that, how is there's a way to make sure that not kids or teachers get overwhelmed with the amount of different options, the kind of what is essential in how to really promote the learning, but without overwhelming them because of these different things that they need to use. I don't know if it's clear. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, George, for this question. This question was asked me when I do confirmation. So just remind me in this period of time. Just I need to mention, because I come from a different background, why I focus about faculty member rather than students, because for responsibility in Saudi Arabia for learning and teaching, guided by a faculty member. The man who is need to start to use a cloud is a start from faculty member, not from a student. So because of that, I focus about this specific kind of people, which is the faculty member or academic staff in all university in Saudi Arabia. So this is what I find from them. What I need to hear from them, because there is so far no publications speak about the faculty member. So this is my first point. The second point, you asked me about the student. There is many ways to stimulate a student to say, engage him to use this one. But at this time, I couldn't say anything like use this particular application or use this or use that, because this independent of in your context, for example. So some people, they like to use Google Classroom. Some people, they say didn't use LMS or Blackboard is annoying. Some people, they use Moodle or something like that. I can manage, I can give you my opinion for this. Maybe I will do some advice for another company. So this is what I can see from my research.
Thank you so much, Faisal. We have just a little bit of time left. Does anyone have a last minute question, maybe for our first group around the collaborative research process? I do have one quick question then, maybe to just wrap things up for the first group, so for Laura and Elizabeth. What would be your top tip, I guess, for working collaboratively with other students, or even if it's a postdoc project? What's the number one thing?
Be very open-minded. Don't walk in with any assumptions. Be open-minded and you'll gain so much from it.
Yeah, I think open-minded and good-intentioned communication
Yeah.
will probably get you through most problems. That's what I've definitely learned.
Yeah. All right, well, we do need to wrap things up because it's 11:15. So thank you so much to all of our presenters. They were really fascinating presentations, and I wish we had another hour for discussion, because I know I had hundreds of questions written down here for all of you, but we've just run out of time. So hopefully at some stage we'll get to catch each other on campus. Faisal, I might pop into the office and see if you've got a copy of your book so that I can see it in person. Otherwise, please jump into the next session and enjoy the day. We then have a break after that, and posters, another session, and networking. So we look forward to seeing you throughout the day. And thanks everyone for coming and your great questions. See you later.